Hi there, and a very warm welcome to Season 6, Episode 32 of People Soup. It's Ross McIntosh here.
If you're in a team where someone in the team is not performing or not even trying, that affects the whole team. And if the leader doesn't address those things, you lose credibility as a leader. So that is being compassionate to go and address that performance issue with that person. It is kindness to that person to point out to them, you're not performing, you are sticking out in this team. We want you to be part of the team. We want you to perform as well as everyone on the team. How can we help you get there? The first point is I'm going to try and help you get there. But if after I've tried to help you and your colleagues have tried to help you, if you're still not there, well, then we've got really difficult things to talk about.
Pea Soupers, in this episode I continue my chat with Dr Ryan Kemp, who is a clinical psychologist, director of Therapies at a large NHS Trust, author and chair of the Division of Clinical Psychology England in the British Psychological Society. We focus in on a theme of compassionate leadership, and our conversation begins with Ryan's reflections on his unexpected transition from clinical psychologist to clinical director and what he learned over the process. Initially, Ryan had no plans or ambitions to take on a leadership role, but he found himself driven by the organisational challenges he encountered and the encouragement from colleagues. We talk about the importance of compassionate leadership, particularly in healthcare settings. Ryan highlights the emotional burden that healthcare professionals face and the need for self-compassion as a foundation for leading others. Additionally, Ryan discusses his approach to leadership training, emphasising vulnerability, authenticity, and the significance of aligning actions with personal values. We also touch upon the book that Ryan has written and is currently refining, with a working title of 12 Steps to Compassionate Leadership. For those of you who are new to People Soup, welcome. It's great to have you here. We aim to provide you with the ingredients for a better work life from behavioural science and beyond. For those of you who are regular Pea Soupers, thanks for tuning in again. We love it that you're part of our community. A quick scoot over to the news desk. There is an ACBS UK and Republic of Ireland conference this year from the 14th to the 16th of November in Manchester. You can find all the details in the show notes, and we'd love to see you there. Our theme is pollination, innovation through connection. So let's crack on. For now, get a brew on and have a listen to part 2 of my chat with Ryan Kemp. So Ryan, to start the second part of our conversation on compassionate leadership, I wanted to ask you for your reflections on your transition into a clinical director role from being a consultant clinical psychologist.
So I had, early in my career, zero ambition to be any type of leader. It's not like I was against it. It was just not on my agenda at all. I really wanted to be a great clinician. And I spent all my spare time reading clinical books, doing courses. I'd come to London. What a place to learn psychology and psychotherapy. Just everywhere you turn, there's brilliant people teaching you stuff. So I was just, my mind was just in that. But what happened was, as I mentioned, in the first session we did, I worked in this really brilliant team to begin with. And then I left that team because I felt, I was there about 4.5 years, but I felt like I needed to experience another team and go somewhere else. And so I went to another team, and that was not a great team. That was a team really struggling. It wasn't the team's fault, but I think there'd been all sorts of reasons why this team was really struggling. And it was a shock to me. And I realized that part of the reason why this team wasn't getting together was the leadership of that team, of which I was part, I should say. So I had a senior role there. And so I started to realize that the impacts of that on the patients and the service users was quite significant. That it wasn't just that the team was in turmoil and their relationships were poor or whatever. Actually, it affected the work we did. And that mattered to me. I wanted the work we did to be as good as it could be. And I was seeing that it wasn't compared to this other team I'd been in. So that, I got really interested in that. But not in a sense that I thought I would end up being some sort of leader one day. Just I wanted to reorganize things and get things, sorted. Anyway, then I was there for about 2 years, and then I got tempted to move to another organization and work somewhere that was much better run. I think there again, I realized that there were aspects of the care being delivered there that I wasn't altogether happy about, which I started to challenge and ask questions about why we're doing things this way and not this way, etc. I'd worked in several teams now, so I was starting to get my confidence up. This is about 6 years into my career. And then one day, someone said to me, almost in passing, they said, Ryan, you've got lots of opinions about how things should be done. Why don't you stop, talking about it and start doing something about it? And it wasn't a criticism. It was more just an encouragement, I think. And it was like a light bulb moment of, maybe they're right. Maybe I can have much more impact on the people that we're serving if I get this team organized and delivering than if I just work with a handful of individuals, which is largely what I was doing. So I thought, right, that's what I'm going to do. So that shifted the way I was spending my time away from doing direct clinical delivery towards trying to skill up other people and skill up the team as a whole in a way. Now, I'm not saying I made some, fantastic impact, and there were lots of other people there. But about 3 years later, the person who was my sort of boss retired, and she encouraged me to apply for a job, which I thought was a crazy idea because there were much more experienced people who could go for that job. But lots of people encouraged me, and I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a bash. I'm probably not going to get it, so nothing to lose, and I'll learn something from doing the application. I applied. I got the job, shocked, but I got it. And people said to me, well, you got it, Ryan, because you try to change things. You're not just trying to keep things the same and protect your profession. You're actually challenging your profession to change and be different, which I didn't realize I was doing that, but I clearly was. And then I was in that role for 4 or 5 years. That was, I was learning about leadership then, leading a very large team of psychologists. And then the Trust did a reorganization and decided to create clinical directors. Before that, they used to have a different title. And so to cut a long story short, I, again, didn't think to apply for these jobs. But people rang me up and said, are you going to apply? And I was thinking, why are people phoning me up? This is nonsense. These were all roles that doctors had, not psychologists and nurses and AHPs, etc. So I couldn't understand quite what they were on about. But anyway, I ended up applying. I didn't actually get the job, but I got positive feedback, which, encouraged me. And then a while later, another clinical director job came up, and I applied for that. I didn't get that job either, so twice failed. But I guess I was on the radar, and then this opportunity to work in this new service that we'd brought into the Trust came along. And that's when I was, given that opportunity to go and do that. It was meant to be temporary and, part-time, but because of the challenges, it quickly became full-time and lasted years. So I guess I wasn't the most obvious person to end up in leadership, even to myself. And today I still love clinical work, and I'm fascinated by it. I guess I'm just using those insights and those learnings to think about more these days about employees and making sure we care for them, care for the organization as a whole. And I don't know. So if you'd have told me at the early part of my career that this is what I'd do, I would have laughed, just because it would have seemed pretty absurd, really.
It's interesting to hear that it was the kind of encouragement or nudges from others that helped you go down this path.
It had a big impact. And I've remembered that. And nowadays, when I see people that I think have got potential, I am very quick to tell them that, because often people just don't see it in themselves. So I want to encourage people, because it's a brave decision to go into leadership, particularly in healthcare. It's a brave decision. It's not an easy role to have. So you need to be encouraged.
And why do you feel that compassionate leadership has such a part to play in healthcare leadership, particularly in NHS leadership?
So I think healthcare I'd call it. Sorry, this is like a bit of a geeky term now, so watch out. But I'd call it an infinite game. And what I mean by that is the needs of the patients and the service users we work with are almost infinite. So if you work with someone, who's, I don't know, might your particular condition might be diabetes or a fractured leg or whatever. But once you encounter people, you invariably realize they have so much that they need, and that their healthcare challenges are quite vast. And also, invariably, you just learn about the lives of people, and it's tough. It's it's a burden. It's an emotional burden, and people talk about healthcare workers as doing emotional labor, and that's what it is, I think. But you can take on so much, and if you're good at it, you do take on a lot. That's what makes you an excellent clinician. Of course, you should also have boundaries and try to manage the lines between work and not work, etc., etc. But the truth is that it's demanding, and as you go up in the sort of hierarchy of any organization, but particularly of healthcare, you start to acquire an enormous sense of how vast this endeavor is we're doing, and the enormous amount of people that are being helped or not helped, because you start to realize that we could do so much more, but we've only got this much resource, so we've got to use it well. But that comes with an incredible challenge. So we're making choices about what we do, but we also make choices about what we don't do, and you become quite aware of those. We can't do this stuff, and as well as a burden. It's hard work. So I think what happens is that healthcare workers and healthcare leaders start to realize the enormity of that. And if for whatever reasons, personal or ecological, or based on the environment in which they work, you can take that personally. You can start to see that as your own failure. And then those self-critical voices can come in and start to do their work. The emotions start to rack up, and it's the potential there for people to be damaged, overwhelmed, affected by their work is just enormous. And to be honest, we see it all the time. It's there. So I think that's the way I see it, is that we start with self-compassion, so that we look after ourselves, we make ourselves strong enough, and then we go outwards and we have compassion for those people that we work with, so that they feel they are supported and capable of doing the work. And then obviously we extend that compassion to all those people that we work directly with or indirectly with, etc. So so that's how I see it. I hope that makes sense.
It does, Ryan. Thank you. And just thinking about the evolution of the compassionate leadership course, is that the problem you're addressing? This sort of, perhaps this overwhelm and this tendency to become self-critical. Is that the major problem we're addressing in compassionate leadership in healthcare?
I think it's that. I want to add a second thing. I think this happens in a lot of industries and a lot of professions. So it's not unique to healthcare, what I'm about to say. But we are generally trained to be clinicians. And at some point, you get promoted to a point where you become a leader. But no one's ever trained you to be a leader. So suddenly you're having to do something that no one's prepared you for. And sometimes that's not the end of the world, because you've had good role models. And we talked about role modeling, last time. But, role modeling can only go so far. But as I described in my career, there was one team that there was great role models, and there was another team that had less good role models. And so that's a problem. If you're not properly trained and prepared to be a leader, you will just do what you've seen done before, which might be good, it might not be, or might just be average, probably mostly average. So I think that's one of the things we're trying to overcome. It's not just that emotional burden stuff, but it's also just giving skills to people to be able to think about being a leader. And so obviously some of that is basic stuff, which I've already mentioned, previously, which is like finance skills, HR skills, performance measuring and all that. But some of it's, I think, quite psychological, which I often is the things that surprise people on our course. So we do a big section now on how to run a team, how to think about a team, not just to think about the individuals in the team. You should do that as well. You should think about all the individuals in your team, because they're all different and they're different challenges, different points in their careers, etc. But the team as a whole exists as well. How do you think about the team as a whole? How do you perhaps apply some skills and some knowledge in that sort of thing? So, for example, I know it's a bit outdated, but, we just teach them about forming, storming, norming, performing, that old Tuckman framework. And for a lot of managers or new managers, that is mind-blowing. They're like, I never knew that before. So this connects to something we've done quite a lot of work on in the trust and on the course, which is psychological safety. Unfortunately, some people misunderstand psychological safety. They think it's about individuals being safe, but actually it's a group, team level phenomena, and you can create it, and you should, as a leader, be trying to create it at that level. I've gone a bit sideways, Ross, sorry. But your original thing was, why teach leadership? Well, I think those two main reasons. One, to care for leaders and to give them skills to be able to cope with the stresses and strains. But secondly, to give them actual leadership skills and management skills so that they can transition from clinician to manager to leader.
I think I see this in every leadership role. I think it might be universal. Sometimes people are put in leadership roles and just assume that by that change in title, they know what the heck they're doing, or they'll magically acquire these skills, when the tendency can be they'll revert to what they did successfully in their previous role, because isn't that the reward they got, the promotion? So I applaud what you're doing. And like you say, people are having their minds blown because they are learning about stuff and it's being made practical and relatable for them to apply where they are right now. Is there any research or literature or books that have informed your thinking on compassionate leadership?
Well, quite a few. It's quite a challenge. Because, if I'm honest, we go back to when we were early thinking about leadership training. I guess at that point, I hadn't really sort of consulted the world of writings on leadership in a systematic way. But I would say, if I have to name a few, I think, Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety has been, really good. I've looked a lot at coaching and team coaching, trying to see what's, relevant there and alive in that space. And I got really interested in systems theory, about how systems work. I don't know that I could name a book on that. I'm probably not. And because I've got a sort of psychodynamic background, I've looked at quite a lot of the psychodynamic literature on leadership. So some of that, developed in London by people at the Tavistock, for example, but there are people all over the world.
I remember in one of the early cohorts for compassionate leadership at the Trust, we gave them each a copy of Brené Brown. Was that Dare to Lead, I think it was?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Brené Brown. How could I have forgotten that? Yeah. Beyond just that book, Dare to Lead, I've probably got 4 or 5 of her books. And her podcast series is also extremely good. And it was, I think in many ways, she gave permission to many of us to be psychological, to be compassionate, and to give us the vocabulary to be able to express that way of working, and to show that it's not just an acceptable way to be a leader, but actually this works. There's evidence for that. And there was a group in the States, I think at Northwestern University, that done research on compassionate leadership. So that was quite instructive. I don't know that there was exactly a book on that. And then also, just to link back to ACT, the pro-social book as well was very useful and, packed with evidence. And I would also say Michael West has also been a particular inspiration as well. I mean, he's very active in NHS circles, but a couple of years ago, he put out a book on compassionate leadership, which is jam-packed with evidence around the various components of compassionate leadership. So if you ever need to, or if I ever need to justify why I'm doing something, I can go and find the evidence there. I don't think it's a very practical book, but it's absolutely, proves the case for why compassionate leadership is needed and works.
And maybe now's the time to reveal to the listener that you're also, writing your own book on compassionate leadership. Can you tell us any more about that?
Well, the working title is 12 Steps to Compassionate Leadership, and it's got 12 chapters, basically, with a focus on different things. Yeah, to be honest, I'm slightly nervous talking about it because it's taken me so long to get it out. I mean, I have written it; it's finished, but just getting it over the line is terribly hard work, I have to say. And I've come to really appreciate people who manage to write books, because actually writing them is one thing, finishing them is a whole nother thing. So I'm hopeful that it'll be out maybe late 2025, depending on me mainly, just doing the work to actually polish up each chapter and get it out there. But yeah, it's going to have most of those components we've talked about today. Thinking about self-compassion, thinking about compassion for others, psychological safety, focus on performance. I mean, one of the things I say to people who ask me about it is, I think sometimes people think compassionate leadership is just about being nice to people, being kind. And it is those things. But if that's all it is, then that's not really leadership. Leadership is there to achieve something, to allow something to happen. And therefore, you have to focus in on what that thing is and aim to achieve it. If you work in a team that's really doing a great job, gets great either satisfaction from customers or from service users or patients, then you feel good about yourself. It drives you to do even better work. If you're in a team where you're getting a lot of negative feedback, that is difficult. That is really difficult. And I don't think it helps to improve the work, although as a leader, you've got to focus in on that. So for me, being a compassionate leader is not to forget about the fact that the work is there to do something, and you can't forget about it. You can't just be kind to people. That's not an acceptable enough focus if you forget about the outcomes and the focusing on results, because that's why the team exists there.
And I think that could almost be one of the barriers to introducing compassionate leadership, is people say, oh, well, it's just being kind to people and kind of letting them off.
Yeah, I think that is what people think. I mean, I'll be honest with you, very senior leaders in our organization have said that to me. This is just, soft, fluffy stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is a bit of that. I'm not going to deny it. But if that's all it is, it'll be a failure. We have to achieve the things we're there to achieve. And for me, going back to those experiences in teams, I was having distressed people in front of me. And I wanted to relieve their distress, and I wanted to relieve the distress they were, causing to their families and their communities. And, to take addiction as an example, addiction doesn't just affect that person. It has a radiating effect into families, into communities, into the criminal justice system, for example. So, yes, I want to help that person, but I really want to help them. And I want to know what's the best thing to do for them, both at a sort of individual level, but also as a team. How is the very best we can focus ourselves to have the biggest impact? And if we do that, we're going to get good feedback. That's going to make us feel good. And then we'll go again and we'll get better and better. So I do say to people, actually, compassionate leadership is tough. It's actually tough to do it because you have to stay focused on the outcomes, and you have to also then be, I don't know, it can be tough to be compassionate as well. It can be it can be hard sometimes to be compassionate to yourself. It's much easier to neglect yourself, and you have to work really hard to be compassionate to those people you're working with. And sometimes, you get into difficult relationships, challenging relationships with your colleagues. It's not always just plain sailing. There are times when you're going to have difficult conversations, and learning those skills is necessary as well. If you're in a team where someone in the team is not performing or not even trying, that affects the whole team. And if the leader doesn't address those things, you lose credibility as a leader. So that is being compassionate, to go and address that performance issue with that person. It is kindness to that person to point out to them, you're not performing, you are sticking out in this team. We want you to be part of the team. We want you to perform as well as everyone on the team. How can we help you get there? The first point is, I'm going to try and help you get there. But if after I've tried to help you and your colleagues have tried to help you, if you're still not there, well, then we've got really difficult things to talk about. But I think as a leader in a situation like that, if you're seen to tackle those things, then you gain credibility, and people realize that you care about them by focusing in on those issues.
I love the way you've expressed that, Ryan, because tackling those, let's take that example, the person who's being disruptive or not performing is a compassionate act. And the temptation can be for leaders, that's too difficult to address. And if you're doing that, it could be viewed as a reward. If you don't tackle it and think about the whole team, then you're rewarding this type of behavior, and that can cause further damage to a team. So absolutely agree. Compassion is hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard work. It's a lot of work. Look, I think in healthcare, most leaders are naturally compassionate. That's why they got in the game. And I think they often are a little bit nervous to get into that territory of having those difficult conversations. And they can be avoidant. And if we have systems that are not compassionate, so non-compassionate systems, you as an individual leader, say in a team, might not feel supported by your manager or by the organization as a whole, then you're going to be quite nervous to go into that space of, having that tricky conversation, uncomfortable conversation. So part of what empowers a team manager or a team leader or whatever is to know that their support structures are there to help them. So it's not just sitting in an individual manager. The ecosystem of the organization helps that person to be able to do those things. So compassionate leadership is not just a thing that a person has, but that the organization as a whole embodies and enacts. And that's not easy. That's not easy.
And how are people responding to the compassionate leadership training? Have you got any sort of examples of sort of the light bulb moments or the insights people have gained?
Well, you're probably asking the wrong person for that. You should be asking those. We do quite a lot of feedback. So, so we ask all the participants to feedback, as I said, after every session at the end of the program. We've also got a partnership with Brunel University where they're doing a formal evaluation of every program we do and keeping a sort of longitudinal set of data, because we're running our fourth program at the moment. We'll start our fifth program in late 2025. So, we're in the hundreds of people now being through this program. But one of the things that we do is we try to get the leaders of the organization to be part of the program as much as possible. So obviously they're grateful that I might spend some time with them, but they feel really affected when the chief exec turns up and says, I'm supporting this program. I'm here to support you. Please get the most out of it. Please prioritize this program. That means a lot to them. And of course, we have the chief operating officer, the chief people officer. Right. We try to get as many of the senior leaders in as well. And we also run a kind of, we run a learning set part. So everyone's divided into small learning sets, and very senior directors run those learning sets. So they're getting more coaching and support from those programs. But I think one of the things that always gets a rustle in the audience on the launch day is I'll say something like, you might think you're here today to do this leadership program because you're in trouble, because somebody thinks that you're not a good enough leader, but that's not true. You're here today because you've been selected. We believe in you. We are here to invest in you. You are the future. You're not in trouble. And there's a murmur every time because I think people invariably worry that they've been sent on a course because they're failing. And we are very clear, when the group of us who run the program, very clear. This is not about trying to fix basket case leaders. If we need to do that work, we'll do it. But in a program, we want to develop the best people. We want this to be about a reward, about an encouragement, about setting a trajectory for people's careers. One of the other things I'll just mention as well is my speech at the beginning. We all do a little introduction, just like you did with me in the last session. And I specifically spend most of my session talking about my failures, mostly about all the jobs I applied for that I didn't get, which is the vast majority of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people come up to me and say, oh, that's not what I was expecting. I thought you'd tell me about how all the brilliant things you've done in your career. And I don't talk about that because there's a misapprehension that people who've got into senior jobs are just somehow destined for it or plucked up by, I don't know, some powerful people or something. It's just not true. I come from quite a humble background and I've failed a lot. And it's okay to fail. It's okay not to be perfect. And in fact, your imperfections and your struggles will make you better at being a leader and a clinician down the line. So don't worry about that. Embrace that. Use those stumblings to be the pebbles that are in your shoes that you then take out by learning something and being better.
Now, Pea Supers, this is the point where we had a technical hitch, which meant that we had to regroup to re-record this final segment. You'll notice a change in the sound quality, but as ever, Ryan's words are packed with wisdom.
But the truth is that the journeys of most leaders have been roundabout. They've deviated, they've gone in different directions. Mostly, they've never had an intention to get into those roles in the first place. So we want to express that through these stories. But I think it highlights to people that, that leaders are human beings. They have strengths, but they also can get things wrong. And that it isn't, some sort of ordained passage through life that gets you into these positions, and that there can be sideways moves, sometimes even backwards moves before people find their place. And for me, I was a reluctant person to go into leadership. It wasn't something I had a strong desire for. And yeah, there were times when it was difficult. I would be encouraged to apply for a job. I remember one particular one. This is a slightly strange one, but there was a university, a really top university here in London, and one of the professors rang me up and said, "We've got this position going. I really think you're the person. Would you consider applying?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not really an academic." She's like, "No, we really want you. Please apply." So I applied. They didn't even shortlist me. It's a crushing blow to your ego at that point. And certainly, in our organization, I think that's happened to me a couple of times. People encouraged me to go for it, even the person who's appointing, and then didn't give me the job. And I think that's okay, because I think the higher up the sort of pyramid you climb, the more brilliant everyone is around you. And so you might be very good. You might have a lot of potential, but so does everyone else. So again, it's difficult. But we want to convey to the people that are learning, it's okay to talk about your fragility. It's okay to have those conversations. It actually makes you more human. It makes you come across as authentic, because it's very hard to tell those stories and then I don't know, brush them under the carpet or something, because I think they reveal something very human about you.
Thank you, and I applaud you and your colleagues for role modeling that vulnerability. It's a lovely way of framing that compassionate leadership program, and to realize that, hey, these folks haven't got it all sorted. They didn't just go up in this linear fashion. A squiggly career path is more the norm than we might expect. And Ryan, what keeps you going in those moments of doubt?
Wow. Well, that's a good question. I think, ultimately, I think it comes back to being aligned to your values. to
Mm.
knowing what really matters to you. And if you are doing things that are in line with those values, then I think it's not always very easy to continue, but it's not that difficult. And I think I've always tried to make moves in my career that are aligned to that. So wherever I am, I'm actually really happy usually, and it's not like I'm desperate to move on or make changes. So if things don't work out, that's fine. I'm happy here, just getting on, cracking on with what I'm doing right here, right now. I think when you're in a job and you struggle with things in the role, again, I think it's about, am I acting out of my values? Have I got the purpose and the mission of this team, whichever team it is, clearly, guiding me? If I'm doing those things and I'm clear about that, then yeah, I think things being difficult is the job of leadership.
Mm.
It's not the job of leadership for it to be easy. And why would I even want to do that? I don't
Mm.
know. But sometimes I think people think the difficulty is sort of conceptual or cognitive, or how to navigate the AI world. I mean, that's the latest thing, isn't it? But no, I don't think it's that. I think most people are clever enough to do that stuff. I think it's sometimes being faced with unethical behavior by your colleagues, being faced with having to make very difficult financial decisions that are going to affect people. People might lose their jobs or have to change jobs or something. I think it's sometimes letting down the people that you're there to serve. Like for me in healthcare, not delivering good enough care for patients. I mean, that is
Mm.
one of the most horrible things to have to get your head around. And it does happen because clinicians are not perfect and they make mistakes. And with all good intentions, sometimes services are set up in a way that just isn't quite right.
Mm.
And we have to address those things. When we realize it, we need to stay awake, conscious of it, looking for those things. But when it happens, it's really hard to deal with. It's emotional, and I have some dark emotional times sometimes. I'm not trying to avoid those things, but at the same time, I just have to take a little time, let the emotions settle, and then just
Mm.
check in with myself. Around, is this aligned with my values? Am I doing the things I'm doing here to deliver on this purpose? And if that's right, then I just have to take a deep breath and go for a walk or listen to some music or do the things that support me.
Mm. Thank you so much. I really get that strong alignment with your values, the way their values can be your guide, even in the most difficult of times. And that's sitting with discomfort as well. Sometimes I think things like, how is AI going to impact on our organization? Is a distraction from sitting with that discomfort. Sometimes I think
Mm,
it's more palatable to think about AI and the impact of that than actually thinking, gosh, we've got this budget decision to make, or we've got this service evaluation to reflect on.
mm.
And I feel like that was a cracking takeaway in itself, but I wondered if you had anything else to leave the P Supers with, maybe in terms of leadership and compassion in a healthcare setting, any takeaway you'd like to leave the listener with?
Well, I've been told that the thing that people remember the most about what I say is the simple thing of you can't be compassionate to others if you don't start with compassion to yourself. And in fact, somebody once wrote me an email and said, who did you quote, Ryan? And I had to say it was me. So I'm sure someone else said it before me. But yeah, but I do think that's true, because I think particularly in healthcare, people are coming in because they are naturally compassionate. They're usually really trying to change the world and care for others, but they can be quite self-sacrificing in that. And, it's talking to a lot of young leaders, they feel like it's their job to protect their team, but that protection can be at their own cost. And if that
Mm.
goes on too long and is too deep, then they suffer, compassion fatigue, moral injury, burnout, etc. And then they often drag on for a long time after that, just trying to, stagger on almost. So I think taking the time to really think about what you as a leader need. And it's not, I'm talking about big stuff. Usually it's little stuff, just,
Mm.
making sure you work reasonable hours, that you you get the physical exercise, that you do the things that nourish and nurture you, that you maintain the relationships in your life. Those things are really important because they allow you to work well. I mean, during the pandemic, I started going for walks, and I realized that if I took a 30-minute walk in the middle of the day, I actually worked so much better in the afternoon. Now, I could have just worked through that 30 minutes to do more emails or whatever, but actually that led to a whole 3 or 4 hours of worse performance after that. So that 30 minutes looks after me, but it also means I do better work after that. So yeah, so that'll be my takeaway.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ryan. And thanks for joining me on People Soup. It's really great to hear your reflections. And I have a feeling you'll be back on in the not too distant future, either talking about your book or others of your specialisms. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ross. It's been delightful. Thank you.
That's it, folks. Part 2 of my chat with Ryan in the bag. You'll find the show notes for this episode at peoplesoup.captivate.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this episode, we'd love it if you told us why. You can email at peoplesoup.pod@gmail.com, and on the socials, I'm still posting on Instagram at people.soup, and I'm on LinkedIn too, as well as a new account on Blue Sky. Just search for my name. Now more than ever, you can help me reach more people with the special People Soup ingredients. Stuff that could be really useful for them. So please do share, subscribe, rate and review. Thanks to Andy Glenn for his spoon magic and Alex Engelberg for his vocals. But most of all, dear listener, thanks to you. Look after yourselves, Pea Soupers, and bye for now. Thank you so much again, Ryan. I'll keep you posted. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Have a good summer in the meantime.
Thanks very much, Ross. You too.
Okay, cheerio now.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye-bye.